Where there is justice, you will have peace because people are being treated decently. Where you don't have justice, where you have injustice and oppression and lack of freedom, you have war. So it's wonderful to look back on your life, if you can, and say it's been dedicated to the tranquility of order, which is the work of peace.
Please welcome U.S. Department of Justice Civil Rights Prosecutor Tona Boyd.
As a prosecutor for the Civil Rights Division Criminal Section, I will never forget standing before my very first jury in Georgia and delivering my very first opening statement. So I am going to share just a snapshot of that with you guys today. The defendant, Police Chief Walter Young, thought that he was above the law. On March 24th, 2011, the defendant walked into the Tift County Jail in Tifton, Georgia. He approached a man who was seated in a restraint chair. Now that man had his hands cuffed behind his back. He had his legs strapped to the chair, and his face was covered with a white cloth spit mask. Now, as other officers stood by and watched in shock, the defendant, the chief of police, walked up to that fully restrained man and repeatedly punched and slapped him in the face. The defendant hit him over and over again until that white cloth spit mask turned red with his blood. Now, the defendant assaulted that fully restrained man in front of other officers and in front of the jail's video surveillance system. When those other officers tried to warn the defendant, they said, "Hey, we have video cameras in here." You're going to hear how the defendant responded. "I don't give a damn about the cameras." The words of a man who thought he was above the law. But we're here today, ladies and gentlemen, because no man is above the law. So thank you for indulging me and letting me do that one more time. I've always thought it's such a shame. You work so hard on these arguments, you agonize over the words, and then you only get to do it once in court. So thank you for humoring me today. As a federal civil rights prosecutor for the past 7.5 years, I have had the awesome privilege and responsibility of really working on a mission that is rooted in justice. I will never forget some of these awesome moments that I've had traveling around the country prosecuting these cases. Going and traveling across the state of Georgia to meet with victims who had been abused by the very people who were supposed to protect them, and trying to get them to trust and have faith in the system again. Or that time, the very first time I stood in court and said, "Tona Boyd on behalf of the United States." Those are moments that I will never forget. But the job was not without its challenges. Being a Black woman traveling to Georgia and to Louisiana to prosecute these cases, I was not always welcomed with open arms, including by the very people who were supposed to be on my team and to be my partners. And yet, I still had to find a way to work to push the cases forward and to work to endeavor to complete my mission. But in some way, despite those many challenges, it has been almost easy in a way to fight on behalf of justice while cloaked with my role at the United States Department of Justice. Just last week, I announced that I'm going to be leaving the DOJ and working on issues of justice and equality in another forum. In preparing for this talk, I have really reflected on Father Ted's words. How wonderful to look back on your life and to know that you were dedicated to the tranquility of order, to the work of peace. But how am I going to do that when I am no longer working towards the mission of the Department of Justice that I have worked so hard on? And how do we, as ordinary citizens, take up such a challenging call? And so in thinking about Father Ted's words, I was reminded of one of my heroes, an ordinary citizen who was an extraordinary woman, and that is my granny. So Mamie Jones was born in 1919 in Carpenter, Mississippi. She served in the United States Army and in the Air Force for 10 years, and she was the first African American to become a captain in her regiment during the Korean War. She later dedicated her life to federal service by serving as a nurse in the Veterans Administration. To say that my granny was a trailblazer does not begin to do her justice. Her strength of character, her fiery spirit, her true ability to overcome any obstacle in her way, whether that was the virulent racism that she faced in Mississippi, or handling a granddaughter who inherited some of her sass. She never backed down from a challenge. She truly embodied, to whom much is given, much is expected. She didn't let the fact that hospitals in Jackson, Mississippi would not hire a black nurse stop her from serving. She traveled as far as Los Angeles, California, in fact, in order to continue to work on her goals and to continue to serve. She really persisted in the face of great peril and strove to continue to fight for justice and peace in her own way. The great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "We begin to stop living the day that we are silent in the face of things that matter." There are so many injustices that face our world today, whether it's the plight of the poor, or people fleeing from war-torn countries, or families trying to educate their children with limited resources. We, as alumni of this great university, have been given so much. So let us not be silent in the face of things that matter. Instead, let us endeavor to live so that we can look back and say that we worked dedicated towards the tranquility of order, towards justice, and towards peace. What will you say? What will you do? How will your grandchildren remember you? Thank you.